The room was silent, the only sound coming from the soft hum of the desk lamp flickering in the dim space. Shadows stretched across the walls, swallowing the corners of the room in darkness. Joseph sat motionless at his desk, his eyes fixed on the small envelope in his hands. His heart raced as the weight of it settled on him, a weight that felt too heavy for a simple piece of paper. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the quiet, deep and commanding. God has hidden a secret in your life, and it's time for you to know it. The words resonated in the air, vibrating through Joseph's chest as if they were meant only for him. His breath caught in his throat. What secret and why now? He felt a strange pull in his soul, a burning curiosity that he couldn't ignore. Everything in him told him that this moment, this revelation, was not just some random coincidence. This was the beginning of something big, something that could change everything. Joseph's hands trembled as he slowly opened the envelope, the weight of the unknown hanging over him like a storm ready to break. Joseph stared at the open envelope, but his mind was elsewhere, lost in the labyrinth of his own thoughts. The small apartment around him was dimly lit, the walls closing in as memories of his past failures flooded his mind. At 45, Joseph's life felt like a series of missteps. He had once dreamed of being more, of accomplishing something that mattered, but somewhere along the way, those dreams had faded, replaced by a string of disappointments. His career had stagnated. Relationships had crumbled. The passion he once had for life had dulled into an endless routine of mundane days. He ran a small, failing repair shop, working long hours, only to barely keep the lights on. His friends had drifted away, and his family, they were concerned, but even they didn't know how to reach him anymore. The truth was, Joseph had been alone for a long time. Alone with his thoughts, alone with his mistakes, and alone with a deep, gnawing feeling that he had missed something important. At night, when the world outside fell quiet, Joseph often found himself staring at the ceiling, asking the same questions over and over. Why am I here? What is my purpose? No answers ever came. Only silence. Only the weight of uncertainty. Now sitting in the small, dim room holding this mysterious letter, Joseph couldn't help but feel a strange sense of anticipation. Could this be the answer he had been waiting for? Could this be the moment that changed everything? He had no idea what the secret was, but for the first time in years, he felt something stir within him, a spark of hope. Perhaps, just maybe, this was the beginning of something different, something that could finally give his life the meaning he had been desperately seeking. And so Joseph took a deep breath, set the letter aside, and prepared himself to uncover what he had never thought possible, the answer to the question that had haunted him for so long. The phone buzzed on the table beside him, breaking the stillness of the room. Joseph reached for it absent-mindedly, his fingers hesitating for a moment before he swiped the screen. It was a text from an old friend, Alex. The name brought a rush of memories. Alex had been one of the few people who had truly understood him years ago, before life had taken them in separate directions. They had lost touch, but Joseph always remembered him as someone who spoke of faith with a kind of certainty that Joseph had never had. The text was simple, but its message sent a shiver down Joseph's spine. Joseph, I know this might sound crazy, but there's something blocking you. I've seen it, this force, invisible but powerful, stopping you from moving forward. God has hidden something from you, something crucial, and it's the key to changing everything. You have to uncover it or your fate will be sealed. Joseph read the message twice, disbelief creeping in. He didn't respond immediately, his mind reeling. Blocked by a force, the words felt like they belonged to someone else's life, not his. He stared at the phone screen as if the words themselves might change with another glance. But they didn't. They were the same. He set the phone down slowly, a deep unease settling over him. What did Alex mean by an invisible force? Was this some kind of spiritual attack? Or was he just losing his mind? Joseph had never considered himself superstitious, but something about the message gnawed at him. The weight of it settled on him, making his chest tighten. He had never felt like there was something blocking him other than his own failures, of course. But now that Alex had mentioned it, He couldn't shake the feeling that something had been keeping him from breaking free. And then came the second part of the message. God has hidden something from you, something crucial, and it's the key to changing everything. A sudden wave of fear washed over Joseph. What could it be? What had God hidden from him? Why, he had never been one to delve too deeply into questions about fate, destiny, or divine intervention. But Alex's words cut through the fog of his confusion. If this was true, if there was something he was meant to uncover, then he had to find it. He had to know what God had hidden from him, or his life would remain the same, trapped in an endless loop of disappointment. Joseph stood up, pacing the small apartment. The fear was growing, yes, but so was the curiosity. He could feel it pulling at him, this need to discover the truth. Was it a test of faith, a challenge, or something far greater, a secret that could unravel the very fabric of his life he didn't know? But the urgency in Alex's message stirred something deep inside of him. As the weight of the decision pressed on him, Joseph realized he had reached a crossroads. He could ignore the message, walk away from the possibility of change, and continue living a life of quiet desperation. Or he could take the leap, search for the truth, and risk everything for the chance to understand why he had been chosen to uncover this hidden secret. He looked down at the letter again, the words still burning into his mind. God has hidden a secret in your life, and it's time for you to know it. The path was before him. He had a choice to make. And for the first time in years, Joseph felt a surge of something more than doubt. It was hope, the kind of hope that made him believe just for a moment that this time, maybe, just maybe, his life could be different. The conflict had been set. Joseph had a decision to make, and there was no turning back. The secret was out there waiting, but would he dare to seek it? Over the next few days, the weight of Alex's warning lingered in Joseph's mind, gnawing at him, even when he tried to push it away. He began to notice strange things happening, little signs that seemed too significant to be just coincidences. It started with the dreams. They were vivid, surreal, and deeply unsettling. Each night, Joseph would fall asleep only to be pulled into a world where events were playing out in ways that felt all too familiar. But they weren't just familiar, they were haunting. He dreamt of a car accident that hadn't yet happened, the screech of tires, the sound of a collision ringing in his ears. In another dream, he saw himself standing at the edge of a cliff, the wind howling in his face, and a sense of impending danger that he couldn't shake. The dreams felt real, so real that he woke up with a cold sweat on his forehead, his heart pounding in his chest. The images lingered throughout the day, as if trying to warn him of something. He dismissed the dreams as stress at first, blaming the anxiety of his search for the truth. But then one morning, something happened that made him reconsider. Joseph was walking to his car when he noticed an elderly woman standing near the sidewalk, her hands shaking as she clutched a small bundle of papers. She looked at him, her eyes wide and knowing, as if she had been waiting for him. "You," she said, her voice trembling. "You are the one, aren't you? The one who is meant to find the truth." Joseph froze, confused. He had never seen this woman before in his life. "Excuse me," he asked, his voice shaky, but the woman only nodded as if everything had already been decided. "You're on the path. Be careful, child. The secrets you seek are dangerous." Before he could ask anything else, the woman turned away and disappeared into the crowd, her frail form swallowed by the bustling streets. Joseph stood there, stunned and unsettled. What was that about? Was she simply an old woman caught up in her own delusions? Or was there more to her words than he could understand? As he drove home later that day, the eerie feeling didn't leave him. His mind replayed the encounter over and over again, and it was as if something deep within him was stirring something that he hadn't been able to name before but now felt undeniable. The next few days brought more oddities. He was walking down the street when he passed a store window. The reflection staring back at him wasn't his own face, it was a stranger's. He blinked and looked again. The image was gone, replaced by his own reflection, but the strange face had looked so real, so vivid. It unsettled him further, yet he couldn't find a logical explanation for it. Then there was the phone call. Joseph was sitting at his kitchen table reviewing the letters and notes he had gathered in his search when his phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize. "Joseph," a voice said, distorted and unclear. "You are getting closer, but there's more than you realize. They are watching you." The line went dead before he could respond. He tried to shake it off, tried to convince himself that he was overreacting. But deep down, the feeling of being watched, of being followed, wouldn't leave him. The signs were mounting, and they were beginning to feel like pieces of a puzzle, pieces he wasn't sure he was ready to put together. Then came the final straw. One night, as he walked home from a late shift, Joseph found himself standing in front of a church. He hadn't planned to stop, but his feet moved of their own accord, carrying him to the large wooden doors. He hesitated before pushing them open, stepping inside. The air was thick with the smell of incense, the dim light casting long shadows across the pews. He wasn't sure why he had come, maybe for answers, maybe for comfort, but something inside him told him this was where he was supposed to be. As he sat in a pew, his hands folded in his lap, a voice suddenly spoke from behind him. "You are seeking the truth, but the truth will cost you. It will reveal things about yourself that you may not want to know." Joseph whipped around, his heart racing, but there was no one there. The church was empty. The silence pressed in on him. He stood up abruptly, his legs weak. What was happening? What was all of this? Was this some kind of divine intervention, or was he losing his mind? The anxiety swelled in his chest. Each moment felt like a step closer to uncovering something monumental, something he wasn't sure he was ready to face. The stakes had been set. The tension had built. There was no turning back now. He had to uncover the secret. But what if the truth was something he wasn't ready to handle? What if it tore everything apart? The feeling of being watched, the strange encounters. It was as if the world was pushing him towards something bigger than he could comprehend. Joseph had only one choice: to follow the signs, no matter where they led, and find out once and for all what God had hidden from him. But the journey was only beginning, and the path ahead was shrouded in mystery, danger, and unanswered questions. The secret was waiting, and Joseph was about to discover it, whether he was ready or not. The weight of the past few days hung heavily on Joseph's shoulders, but something had shifted within him. The eerie dreams, the strange encounters, the voice on the phone, it all pointed to one undeniable truth. He couldn't ignore it anymore. He had to search for the truth. The mystery that had been thrust upon him wasn't something he could simply walk away from. If God had hidden something from him, if there was a purpose to his life that he hadn't yet discovered, then it was time for him to find it. Joseph spent the next few days in a fog of uncertainty, his mind buzzing with questions. The fear that had gripped him slowly began to fade, replaced by a growing sense of determination. He wasn't just sitting idly by anymore. Something deep within him stirred an instinct, a knowing that he had to take action. He had to find the answers no matter the cost. On the fourth day, after receiving the cryptic message from Alex, Joseph found himself standing in front of St. Andrew's Church, the same one he had visited in his strange moment of unrest. But today he didn't feel the same anxiety pressing in on him. Today he felt a sense of purpose, no more hesitation. He walked through the old wooden doors and was greeted by the familiar smell of incense, the rich aroma filling the air like a soft embrace. The church was quiet, and the silence offered him a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. He made his way to the front where the altar stood, bathed in soft golden light from the stained glass windows. Father Daniel, the priest he had known since childhood, was there, sitting at the side, reading quietly. He looked up as Joseph approached, his eyes softening with recognition. "Joseph, it's been a while," Father Daniel said with a warm smile. "How are you doing, my son?" Joseph paused for a moment before speaking, unsure of how to begin. He hadn't come to church for confession or advice, not exactly. But the pull he felt toward the truth was undeniable. He needed guidance, and there was no one else he trusted more than Father Daniel. "Father," Joseph began, his voice low but steady, "I need help. I don't know what's happening to me, but I feel like there's something in my life that's been hidden from me. something I need to uncover. I've been getting these strange signs, these warnings, and I don't know where to turn." Father Daniel looked at him intently, his eyes narrowing slightly as if considering Joseph's words carefully. The silence between them stretched for a few seconds before the priest spoke again, his voice soft, yet filled with a quiet authority. "Joseph, the truth has a way of revealing itself when we are ready to see it. You've been searching, but have you really asked God for guidance? Have you been listening?" Joseph hesitated, guilt creeping in. He had been searching, yes, but it had been out of desperation, not faith. He had questioned God, doubted his plan for him, and now faced with the possibility that something profound awaited him, he felt as if he hadn't truly sought God's wisdom. "I don't know," Joseph admitted, his voice cracking slightly. "I've been searching in my own way, but I think I need help. I need to understand what's happening to me." Father Daniel nodded slowly, his gaze softening. "Sometimes, Joseph, the truth we seek is hidden within us. The answers we're looking for are in our hearts, waiting to be uncovered. But we must first be open to the possibility of God's plan, and we must seek his guidance with patience and faith." Joseph felt a warmth spread through him, an unfamiliar sense of peace settling over him. The words didn't provide immediate answers, but they sparked something within him, a flicker of understanding. The truth wasn't just something to be found in books or whispers of strangers. It was something he had to discover within himself with God's help. "I've been looking outside of myself," Joseph said quietly, more to himself than to Father Daniel. "I've been looking for something out there when maybe what I need is here." Father Daniel smiled gently. "Exactly, Joseph. You must look within, and then perhaps you'll see the truth revealed around you." With a newfound sense of clarity, Joseph left the church, the priest's words echoing in his mind. The journey wasn't just about uncovering some hidden truth. It was about rediscovering himself, his faith, and his connection to God. The answers weren't simply out there waiting for him to find them. They were within him, waiting to be unlocked. He just needed to have the courage to seek them. The next step was clear. He needed to dig deeper into his own soul. And that meant more than visiting churches or speaking to clergy. It meant facing his own fears, confronting his past, and understanding why he had been so lost for so long. He had spent years running from himself, and now he had to face whatever truths lay hidden within his heart. Joseph spent the next few days reflecting, praying, and searching for meaning. He revisited his past, examined the mistakes he had made, and the regrets he carried with him. He reached out to old friends, to those who might have known him better than he knew himself, asking them to share their thoughts on who he had been. With each conversation, he learned something new about himself, and it was during these conversations that he began to understand. The key to his purpose wasn't just about uncovering a divine secret, it was about redemption, healing, and forgiveness. He had been searching for a reason for his failures, but the truth was that his failures were part of his journey, not the end of it. God had hidden the secret in plain sight in the lessons he had learned from his struggles. With a renewed sense of purpose, Joseph knew the next step was to seek out the truth, not just in the world around him, but in his own heart. It was time to face the fear that had kept him stagnant for so long. He was ready to discover what God had hidden for him all these years. The journey of self-discovery was only just beginning, and for the first time in years, Joseph felt like he was on the right path, his path. The secret was out there waiting, and he was ready to uncover it. Joseph's mind was racing with all the new revelations, the pieces of his life slowly starting to fall into place. He had always felt a deep longing, a pull towards something greater than himself. Now, as he dug deeper into his search, he felt the weight of God's purpose beginning to settle over him. He knew he was on the right path, but not everyone shared his certainty. It was a quiet afternoon when his sister Maria called him. He hadn't heard from her in a while, and the sound of her voice felt like a comforting presence amidst the whirlwind of his thoughts. "Hey, Joseph," she said, her tone softer than usual. "Can we talk? I'm really worried about you." Maria was only a few years younger than him, but they had always shared a special bond, one forged in childhood, through thick and thin. She was one of the few people Joseph had always trusted with his heart. So when he heard the concern in her voice, a knot of anxiety twisted in his stomach. "What's going on?" he asked, trying to sound casual, though his heart was already racing. "Listen," Maria continued, her voice tremulous. "I've been hearing things from Mom, and I know you've been going through a lot, but Joseph, I'm really worried. All this talk about secrets and fate, it's like you're losing yourself. You've been changing, and not in a good way." Joseph felt a chill run down his spine. His sister had always been protective, but this was different. The worry in her voice was like a warning bell, a sign that something was terribly wrong. "I'm just trying to figure things out, Maria," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "You don't understand. This is something I have to do. I need to know the truth." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and when Maria spoke again, her words felt like a punch to his gut. "Joseph, I know you think you're doing the right thing, but this search you're on, it's not healthy. You're digging into things that should be left alone. You're starting to become obsessed with it, and it's tearing you apart. I'm scared, Joe. I'm scared you'll lose yourself in all of this." Joseph's chest tightened. He had expected support, understanding, but instead Maria's words were like a wall, blocking him from the very thing that had given him hope, the search for the truth. "Maria, you don't get it," he said, his voice rising slightly. "This isn't just about me. This is about something bigger. I have to find out what God has hidden from me. It's the only way to understand everything that's happened in my life. I've got to keep going." Another pause, heavier this time, and then Maria's voice broke through, softer but no less firm. "Joseph, please, I'm begging you, don't do this. Don't dig deeper. There are things you don't understand, things you're not ready for. It's going to change you, and not in the way you think. You could lose everything, your peace, your faith, your sanity." The words hit him harder than he expected. He had always looked to Maria for guidance, but now she was the one pulling away from him. Her fear, her caution, it felt like a betrayal, a rejection of everything he was fighting for. "You don't believe in me," Joseph said, the hurt clear in his voice. "You don't believe I can handle this. You're telling me to stop, to give up on everything I've been trying to understand. How can you say that?" Maria's voice trembled. "I do believe in you, Joe. I always have. But this isn't you. You're changing, and I can't just sit by and watch you destroy yourself. You don't need to find some secret to be happy. You don't need to dig into the unknown to feel whole. You're already enough." Joseph stood in silence, the weight of her words pressing on him like a vice. His sister's warning echoed in his mind, her words like chains trying to hold him back. But something deep inside of him resisted. How could she not understand? He couldn't stop now. Not when he was so close. "You don't understand," Joseph muttered, barely above a whisper. "I have to do this. I have to find the truth." And with that, he hung up the phone, feeling heavier than ever in his hand. The conversation had left him shaken, the tension between them now thick and unspoken. He wanted to call her back, to explain, to make her see, but deep down, he knew that the rift had already begun. His quest for truth had already started to push those closest to him away. But what choice did he have? Joseph's heart pounded as he looked out the window, his mind racing. Was Maria right? Was he losing himself in this search? Was it really worth it to risk everything, his relationships, his peace of mind, just to uncover some secret, some divine purpose he wasn't even sure was real? The conflict within him grew. He knew that the road ahead would only get harder, that the search for truth would continue to tear at the fabric of his life. But he couldn't stop. Not now. And with that decision, Joseph felt something shift within him, an inner resolve, cold and unyielding. The truth, whatever it was, had to be found, no matter who or what it cost him. The tension with Maria was only the beginning. The deeper he dug, the more everything and everyone he loved seemed to pull away. But Joseph was determined. He was the chosen one. And nothing, not even the fear of losing his family, would stop him from discovering the secret that had been hidden from him all his life. The days following his conversation with Maria felt heavier than ever. Joseph couldn't shake the gnawing feeling of doubt that lingered in his mind. Was he truly on the right path? Or was he simply too blinded by his own need for answers, for purpose? Maria's words echoed in his head. You could lose everything, your peace, your faith, your sanity. It was a thought that plagued him, making it harder to sleep, harder to think. But Joseph knew he couldn't stop now. The pull to uncover the truth, to understand the divine purpose hidden within him was too strong. He had to push through the fear no matter the cost. Joseph had been through hardships before losing his job, facing broken relationships, but nothing had prepared him for what he was about to face. He knew that the journey ahead would test him in ways he couldn't imagine. But as he sat alone in his apartment one evening, staring at the old letter again, he knew this was different. This was something that would challenge him on a much deeper level. The next morning, Joseph felt a strange compulsion to go to the place that had once been a sanctuary for him, the old church on the corner of his street. He hadn't been there in years, but something inside told him he needed to go. As he walked through the familiar doors, he felt an almost immediate sense of discomfort. The church was empty, as it often was during the day, but today the silence felt oppressive. It felt as though it was waiting for him to do something he didn't know how to do. Joseph sat down at one of the pews, folding his hands in his lap, his heart racing. He closed his eyes and tried to pray, but the words wouldn't come. He felt the familiar presence of God, but it wasn't comforting like it used to be. It was demanding. "Why, God?" Joseph whispered, his voice trembling. "Why am I being tested? What is it you want me to learn from all of this? What is the secret you've hidden?" The church, quiet and still, seemed to close in on him. His mind raced with all the unanswered questions, the fear, the doubt. Was he ready to face the truth, whatever it was? Could he handle it? Could he handle the weight of what God was calling him to do? Suddenly, Joseph felt the unmistakable presence of something else, a strange, unsettling sensation that made his skin crawl. It wasn't the peace of divine reassurance. It was something darker, something more challenging. The air around him seemed to shift heavy with a new kind of tension. He opened his eyes, his heart pounding, and looked up. In front of him, standing at the altar, was a figure cloaked in shadows. A man, or something that looked like a man. Joseph's breath hitched as his eyes focused, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. "Do you seek the truth, Joseph?" the figure asked, its voice deep, almost like an echo in the vast emptiness of the church. Joseph stood frozen, his body stiffened with fear. It wasn't a voice of comfort. It wasn't the gentle, loving voice of God that he had known. This was something different, something more foreboding. I do," Joseph said, his voice barely a whisper. The figure took a step forward, its presence filling the space with an intensity that made the air seem thick. "Then you must be prepared," the figure said. "The truth you seek will not come easily. It will cost you more than you realize. Your faith will be tested. Your very soul will be tried." Joseph's heart raced, panic rising in his chest. "I'm ready," he said, though even he wasn't sure if he believed the words. The figure's face became clearer, but it was no longer just a man. It was a vision of pain, of trials, of deep sorrow. The face before him showed every fear Joseph had ever known. The disappointments, the failures, the lies he had told himself. All of it was now visible before him in this figure. It was as if this being was drawing all his worst fears to the surface. "Do you know what awaits you, Joseph?" the figure asked again, its voice like a dark whisper. Joseph could barely breathe. His legs shook and the weight of the moment crashed down on him. He felt small, helpless. "I don't," he admitted, his voice faltering, "but I have to know." The figure's face twisted in a knowing smile. "You think you are ready, but the truth is no one can be fully prepared for what's ahead. You will face your darkest fears. Your faith will be challenged in ways you never thought possible." Joseph's eyes filled with tears, his chest tightening. He felt himself breaking under the weight of the words. Every fear he had ever pushed away, every doubt, every weakness he had hidden from himself, everything was coming to the surface, threatening to swallow him whole. But amidst the fear, something else stirred within him, a quiet strength, a flicker of courage. "I'm not afraid," he said, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. The figure's smile faded, replaced by a deep look of understanding. "Then let it begin," the figure said, and in a blur, the church around Joseph seemed to disappear. He found himself standing alone in a dark, barren landscape, the ground cracked and broken. The sky was dark and the air was thick with a sense of desolation. The road ahead stretched on endlessly, a narrow path leading into the unknown. This was his trial, his test. Joseph took a deep breath, steeling himself. He knew this wasn't going to be easy. He knew that the road ahead would be fraught with fear, with doubt, with pain, but he also knew something else. He wasn't alone. This journey was not just about uncovering a secret, it was about facing the deepest parts of himself, the parts he had hidden away for far too long. And so Joseph stepped forward. Each step was heavy with fear, but each step brought him closer to the truth, to the secret God had hidden from him. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but Joseph was ready. He had to be. Joseph had spent the past few days grappling with the weight of his journey. The fears he had confronted, the trials that had tested his resolve, each step had been harder than the last. But with each trial, he felt closer to the truth, closer to uncovering what had been hidden from him for so long. The voice in his head, the figure in the church, it all pointed toward one undeniable conclusion: he was meant for something far greater than he could have ever imagined. But just as the fog of uncertainty began to clear, the universe delivered a blow he wasn't prepared for. It was late one evening when Joseph's phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something told him it was important. He picked up the phone, and the voice on the other end instantly sent chills down his spine. "Joseph," the voice said, cracking with emotion. "It's Alex. I don't know how to say this, but Alex is gone. He died in an accident. A car crash. It happened this afternoon." The words hit Joseph like a tidal wave, washing over him with an overwhelming force. He felt the room tilt beneath him, as though the very foundation of his world was crumbling. Alex, his old friend, the one who had warned him, the one who had sent him down this path, gone. He stood frozen, unable to process the news. Alex had been the one person who had shared his belief in the secret, the one who had set him on this journey, the very person who had urged him to dig deeper, to uncover the hidden truth. Now he was gone, just like that. A part of Joseph couldn't believe it. It didn't make sense. The timing, the irony. Why had Alex, of all people, been taken now? Why couldn't he be here to see the end of this search, to help him understand the truth? "Are you there, Joseph?" the voice on the phone asked, snapping him out of his trance. "Yeah," Joseph finally managed to say, his voice hollow. "I'm here. I can't believe it." The person on the other end gave a heavy sigh. "I know. No one can believe it. The whole thing's just so sudden. But there's something else you need to know. Before he died, Alex left a message for you. He said it was important." Joseph's heart skipped a beat. A message. What could it possibly be? Alex had always been cryptic, but now it felt like the last chance he had to understand the meaning of everything. The voice continued almost hesitantly. "He said God said the secret will be revealed when you're truly ready." The words struck Joseph like a lightning bolt. The secret will be revealed when you're truly ready. What did that mean? How was he supposed to interpret that Alex had always been a little eccentric, speaking in riddles, but this felt different? This message felt like a final piece of the puzzle, a piece that had just slipped away, leaving him alone to figure it all out. "Thank you," Joseph said, his voice barely a whisper. He didn't know what else to say. The phone call ended, but the weight of Alex's death hung heavily in the air. Joseph sank down onto his couch, his hands shaking as he held the phone. He couldn't understand. Alex had been part of his journey, had helped push him toward this truth, and now he was gone. The person who had warned him, who had believed in him, was no longer there to help him finish what they had started. Tears blurred his vision as he let out a long, shaky breath. This wasn't just the loss of a friend. It was the loss of a guide, a mentor, a voice that had kept him steady when he faltered. Now, he was alone with the weight of the truth he had been seeking, alone with the secret that seemed so close, yet so far. But amidst the grief, there was a flicker of understanding. The secret will be revealed when you're truly ready. Alex's message wasn't just a cryptic warning. It was a promise. A promise that no matter how painful the journey, Joseph had to be ready to face whatever was waiting for him. The loss of his friend, while devastating, was part of that preparation. He wasn't ready before. But now, with Alex gone and the weight of the message on his shoulders, Joseph had no choice but to keep going. He stood up, wiping the tears from his eyes. The road ahead was still unclear, but he knew one thing for certain. He had to honor Alex's memory. He had to see this journey through no matter what. Joseph's resolve hardened as he stepped toward the door. The world outside felt colder now, more uncertain, but he could feel the pull of destiny stronger than ever. He wasn't just uncovering a secret anymore. He was walking towards something that would change his life forever. Something he could no longer run from. As he walked out of his apartment and into the night, Joseph couldn't help but feel that Alex's death had been the catalyst for something greater. It was the first true test of his faith, the first of many to come. But he would face them all. He had to, for Alex, for the truth, for himself. The secret was still out there, hidden in the shadows, waiting for him to uncover it. And Joseph was ready. Joseph's heart raced as he stepped into the ancient temple. The stone walls were weathered, covered in creeping ivy, but there was a sense of timelessness that filled the air, a reverence that seemed to breathe through every crack in the structure. The silence was profound, almost sacred, as if the very stones of the temple held the weight of centuries of untold stories. His footsteps echoed through the vast hall, each step bringing him closer to the altar that awaited him at the far end. The dim light from the overhead cracks in the stone illuminated the path, leading him like a trail of breadcrumbs toward the truth he had been searching for. And there at the center of the altar stood a cross, unlike any cross he had ever seen. It was intricately carved, its edges glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. It wasn't made of wood or stone, but something else entirely, something that shimmered and seemed to pulse with energy as if alive. Joseph felt a powerful pull toward it, his hands trembling as he reached out to touch the cross. The moment his fingers brushed against it, a surge of warmth flooded through his body, a sensation of divine connection, unlike anything he had ever experienced. His chest tightened as a vision flashed before his eyes, a vision of himself, not as the man he had always known, but as part of a much larger divine plan. He wasn't just a lost soul seeking answers. He was the key. Tears filled his eyes as the truth became clear, not in words, but in a deep knowing revelation. God had hidden a part of himself within Joseph's heart. The secret wasn't a distant mystery to be uncovered. It had always been with him, buried deep within. He was the answer, the key to unlocking the divine plan, the one chosen to lead and bring about the change he had longed for. The truth hit him with such force that he almost staggered back. Everything he had endured, every hardship, every mistake had led him to this moment. The weight of it all settled upon him, but it wasn't heavy anymore. It was a purpose. And for the first time in his life, Joseph felt whole. As Joseph stood before the cross, the weight of the revelation pressed upon him. His breath was shallow, his heart pounding in his chest. The warmth that had surged through him now radiated outward as though the very essence of God's presence was enveloping him. It was more than just a sensation, it was a calling. The vision before him shifted, and he suddenly saw himself not as a broken man searching for purpose, but as something far greater. He was standing tall, a beacon of light among a sea of darkness. He could feel the power within him, a force not of his own, but divine, something that had always been hidden beneath the surface of his soul, waiting for this moment to awaken. The voice echoed again, but this time it wasn't just a whisper. It was a profound, resonating command that filled the entire temple. You are the one, Joseph. You are not meant to be a passive follower. You have been chosen to lead a spiritual revolution. The secret I've hidden is you. Joseph stumbled back, his mind struggling to comprehend what he had just heard. He was part of the plan. He, a simple man who had failed, who had lived in doubt, was the key to a revolution. The enormity of it threatened to swallow him whole. You, Joseph, are the chosen vessel for a divine purpose. You are to awaken the world to the truth hidden in every heart. The lives of humanity depend on your willingness to embrace your role. His legs gave way beneath him, and he collapsed to his knees, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the message. For years, he had searched for the secret thinking. It was an event, a prophecy to be fulfilled, a moment that would define everything. But it wasn't an event at all. The secret was him. He had always been the answer. His flaws, his fears, his journey, they were all part of the divine tapestry. He was not just a man lost in the chaos of life. He was chosen to change the world. The room around him seemed to shift and expand as the weight of the truth sank in. He was meant to lead, to guide others toward the light that had been hidden within him all along. The struggle, the pain, the failures, they had been part of the preparation for this moment. He wasn't a failure, he wasn't lost. He was God's instrument, and his life had a purpose far beyond what he had ever imagined. Tears welled up in Joseph's eyes as the full realization hit him. He was meant to awaken the world, to bring the hidden truth to those who had been walking in darkness. He was to be a light in the world, to lead a spiritual revolution that would change lives, not just his own, but the lives of every person he encountered. In that moment, Joseph understood the true power of his journey. The secret was not a thing to be uncovered. It was the realization that he was a part of God's greater plan. And now the time had come to step into his calling and lead others toward the truth that had been hidden not just for him, but for all of humanity. The burden was heavy, but for the first time, Joseph felt ready to embrace his divine purpose, ready to lead, ready to change the world. Joseph stood at the edge of the cliff, the winds whipping through the air around him, a storm brewing on the horizon. The vast landscape stretched out before him, a sea of possibilities and choices. His feet were planted firmly on the rocky ground, but his mind felt as if it were adrift, torn between two worlds. Behind him lay the life he had known, the life of confusion, disappointment, and longing. It was a life of relative safety, of familiar pain, of quiet regret. But ahead of him, beyond the cliff's edge, lay something else entirely, a path he hadn't yet fully understood, but felt in the very core of his being. It was the divine calling that had been thrust upon him, a weight that both terrified and empowered him. The truth that had been hidden from him had now been revealed, and with it the responsibility of leading, of changing not only his own life, but the lives of countless others. Joseph could feel the pressure of it all, the enormity of the decision weighing on his chest. Could he really do this? Could he truly step into a role so far beyond what he had ever imagined for himself? The doubts whispered in his ear, urging him to turn back, to walk away from this unknown future and return to the life he had once known, the life where his path was uncertain but familiar. What if I'm not enough? He thought, the thought gnawing at him. What if I fail? What if I'm not ready for this responsibility? But then a memory flashed in his mind, the vision he had seen in the temple, the cross, the words. He remembered the promise, the call that had echoed in his heart, and the realization that had shaken him to his core. He was meant for this. His life had been leading him here all along. Every pain, every failure, every moment of doubt had been part of the preparation. He was the one chosen for this task, and yet as he stood there on the precipice, the fear gripped him once more. It wasn't just fear of failure, it was the fear of losing everything he had ever known. The comfort of his old life, the people he had loved, the stability he had clung to. It was all slipping away. His family, his friends, Maria's warning echoed in his mind, her words filled with fear, trying to hold him back. Don't dig deeper, Joseph. You'll lose everything. He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath, and in that moment, something shifted within him. The fear was still there, but it was no longer paralyzing. The truth had already been revealed to him, and there was no turning back. His fate had already been sealed the moment he stepped onto this path. To turn back now would be to deny his calling, to deny the very essence of who he was meant to be. Joseph opened his eyes, staring out at the horizon. The storm clouds had gathered above, but he no longer saw them as obstacles. They were part of the journey, part of the test. With a steady resolve, he took a step forward, leaving the past behind. His heart pounded, but this time, it was with purpose. He wasn't stepping into the unknown alone. He was stepping into his divine purpose. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the moment that would define the rest of his life. There was no more room for doubt, no more time for hesitation. Joseph knew now that he had a responsibility, a calling, and he had to embrace it fully. "I accept," he whispered to the wind, the words leaving his lips with the weight of finality. The decision was made. He couldn't go back even if he wanted to. The path ahead would be filled with challenges, with moments of uncertainty and fear, but it would also be filled with purpose. And for the first time in his life, Joseph felt ready to walk that path, to lead, to be the man God had always intended him to be. The storm may have been coming, but Joseph knew that he was no longer afraid of it. He was the chosen one, and this was just the beginning.